Hello! Today, my second cine whoop. It's like waiting for a bus. You don't get anything for ages, then two come along all at once. But just before we get into it, a quick reminder, please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it. Comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to click the little bell icon in the corner, which will tell you when I'm uploading a video. But today, we have the Mobula 7 HD. Now, I have to say that the Mobula 7, which was I think the first 2S whoop I got, and still remains, I think, the best. Probably because it is so lightweight. It didn't have any of that yaw washout when you go into a dive and pull out. It was one of the first with an adjustable camera. It was really versatile. I love flying it still, and this one is almost going green around here because it's been in the grass so many times. It's holding up really well. I mean, I wouldn't like to crash it on concrete, but outside in woods, in grass, it just bounces and I go and pick it up. Great. So let's hope they can repeat it with the HD version. So let's get it out of the box first and see what's in there. Again, useful to have a little storage box just for carrying around. And you've got there the instructions. You've got the little OSD board for the Cadix Turtles V2 camera. You get a 300 milliamp hour FrSky battery. This is branded Happymodel and says it's a 30/60C. I should mention it's also high voltage FrSky as well, which is cool. This is quite interesting. In here, I've just noticed something odd. Firstly, I have to say these props are weird because they're nothing like the props that are installed on there. They look absolutely tiny. Get a screwdriver, some spare tiny screws, and this thing which looks interesting. I think what we've got here is a converter XT30 here, and then you can run two 1S batteries in series, so you can have a very lightweight 2S quad using two 1S batteries. Interesting idea. It's kind of similar to what they used on the original, but the original didn't have an XT30 anywhere. And then finally you have the little quad itself. Quite sleek and lovely looking. This is quite very angular. It's got some availability to do tilt on the camera. So 1102 10,000 kV motors, quite high kV for FrSky. The Crazy Bee F4 board once again, and a 5 amp ESC board that can obviously run D-Shot 600. This is the FrSky version, and it runs the good old SPI bus protocol, so we don't ever have to try and stab something in there to bind it. We should be able to do that all through Betaflight itself. A 25 milliwatt to 200 milliwatt VTX, which is changeable via smart audio, as everything is these days. And that's about it. I'm intrigued. I might have to show a close up here. This little prop compared to what's on there is just so tiny. I don't know where they're going with that. I'll have a read through the instructions. It's probably a good idea and find out. But I'll read through the instructions now. Let's jump to Betaflight, shall we? Just before we go to Betaflight, let's just mention these spare props that were in there. They are physically quite different looking. I thought, oh, maybe I'm judging these too harshly. I should install one. But you can see they're quite a bit different in the height. And this is reflected if you do actually install one. What you'll find is the regular prop will spin round, but because those black props sit so high, because they haven't got any depth to them, they won't actually rotate all the way around. They foul on the camera here at the front. So I think I've just got the wrong props here. I have no idea what these could be for, but they definitely do not fit this quad. Okay, so let's go into Betaflight on the Mobula HD now. Now I've already gone in and I've bound the receiver, which is just a case of going into CLI and typing bind. I do like these sorts of ones. So port wise, it's all set up quite nicely. The USB is obviously available, and then you've got TBS Smart Audio set up on UART 1. UART 2 is free. On the configuration screen, it is D-Shot 600 motor stop. I didn't even have to edit myself this time. It's running an 8K loop, faster than normal. It's called Mobula 7 HD by default, which I'll be changing. And this is the key. The SPR RX support of FrSky X, which means it's a D16 style receiver, and that's how you can just go in and type bind and it would just work. Brilliant, really handy on these little things. And there's got a bunch of other stuff enabled, anti-gravity and dynamic filter enabled. Obviously the OSD is there. The beep configuration is all set to yes. I don't know if the D-Shot beep has been enabled yet. We'll check in a second. On pit tuning, they've certainly done some differences here. You can see this slightly non-standard. I'm going to change my super rates to 0.8 and this to something else just to bring my velocities up to about 1,000 either way. Receiver, my radio is plugged in, and what we've got here is an incorrect channel map for me. I'm just going to change this now just to make sure I get it right. Roll, pitch, your throttle. Yeah, that looks okay. It looks like I've got just a little bit of sub trimming to do there. I also noticed on this one, it looks to me like RSSI is on aux 5. I'm just going to put this into range mode to see if that's correct. Yeah, you can see it jump down now. So for some reason they haven't actually enabled that, but we can do that ourselves. Sort that out for later. And modes, they've set us up with arm, angle, air mode, and flip over after crash. Almost my exact modes I use, but I'll be changing that just a little bit to suit me. I'll show you those later. And in the OSD, well, much better than normal. They've got a fairly sensible layout, almost the sort of stuff I generally use, but sort of moved around in the wrong locations. So I'm going to mess around with that and quickly sort this out. So yeah, I went back and I changed my sub trims so everything goes nicely back to 1500. This is my modes. I've got arm on a switch, and then I flick between acro, angle, and horizon. Got my beeper on another switch, which is on the same one as air mode, and tonal mode there, and that is about it. Now I've done something a little bit different in the OSD. It's all kind of normal, and we've got this gap here because this is an NTSC screen. Voltage, mode, minute, and throttle all pretty normal. Normally you'd have the RSSI up in this corner, Curry K in the middle, and the VTX channel here. The reason I've stuck my name in the corner is because on the Turtle, where it's got the recording value, it tends to be over there, and it sort of gets in the way a little bit of being able to read the RSSI properly. So I thought I'd stick my name there because that's the least important of all the information. But anyway, that's about it. We should be ready to fly and give this a go now. So we started off with a bit of indoor flying using a 2S LiPo. This is a 2S 300 milliamp high voltage LiPo, although I just charged it up to normal, I think. And I would have to say I'm flying this without any throttle constraints, and there's a little bit too much power there for indoors. I would say I would maybe tune it down so I'm using like a throttle range of 80%. Now, one thing you may notice is I made a big thing of saying I've changed my OSD around because the Turtles V2 will put its little recording symbol over there, and there's nothing here. Why is that? Well, I pressed the button to record, but that's about it. So just to explain what we've got here on the little Turtles is we got two things to think about. We've got this little SD card slot where you put in your class 10 memory card. I'm using a little 32 gig one here. And round the front we've got this little button, and this button is used to turn the recording on and off. Now, one good thing about this camera is if you forget to stop your recording, you just unplug, you won't lose the recording, which you will do in many of the devices. You'll lose the last couple of seconds, but generally speaking, you've landed and you've unplugged and you go, oh no, I forgot to stop it. You don't have to do this. That's good stuff. However, I was pressing the button, I was flying around the house, and it worked pretty well. We had some good fun. We did a bit of outside. We even did a couple of flips to see how it would work, and it felt pretty lightweight, not that much different from the regular Mobula, maybe a little bit heavier, and the throttle, as I said, probably needed a little bit of tuning down, so I wasn't quite getting that full power. I didn't quite need it inside. So I got the SD card out, had a look, and there was no recording on there. And as it turns out, that little button is not working, it's not doing anything. So I got round this by using the little OSD thing for the Turtles. And if you're wondering where the cable is, it's tucked in here, actually in the quad itself. And you have to be a little bit careful to make sure that's nicely tucked away, because it's long enough where it will hit the props and you'll go down. Anyway, I plugged this in and I use this option for auto recording. So what will happen now is I power on and it will start recording, and obviously to stop recording I need to unplug the battery, which I think is a reasonably good way of doing it anyway, because if you were to use the button you'd need something like a little screwdriver to reach in and press it, unless you've got like tiny insect like fingers. So that's okay, but it's a bit of a shame that the camera's not working properly. I don't know what's up with that. It's just a fault one here or what, but there you go. So having fixed this problem, this is what it looks like with the HD camera going, and the resulting footage I think is very good. Get excellent 60 frames per second 1080p, and it's pretty good clarity too, fairly smooth. I've got the camera all the way down for this type of inside flying on 2S, so you can see the little ducks there, but obviously you can angle that up a bit more if you prefer not to see it. And as I said, there's plenty of power on 2S. In fact, I think I would, as I said before, maybe put it on something like an 80% throttle rate rather than the full 100. But yeah, you can throw this around and it still feels pretty light. It's obviously heavier than a regular little whoop, but it doesn't. It really comes across as being just a normal little whoop you're flying. Really, there's hardly anything in it that you can feel. So how's this translate to outside? Well, here's the outside live picture, and this is what I mean about the recording indicator and the little timer on the turtles there. Of course, where we've got the OSD information there, it's actually fairly good because it's not blocking anything, which is good news. So I just wanted to show you what it looked like in the live view outside, because you are getting the live view through this HD camera, and it's never been as good as a dedicated camera, but as far as this one goes, it's pretty good. I actually started off here and realised I'd not set the rates. So they're still on the default, so I had to come back in and change this. But let's do that and we'll go out and show you what the HD looks like. So yeah, this is back after the rate change and it's feeling a bit better, and that is essentially what the onboard microphone in the Turtles will give you, an absolute screaming noise. So I don't know if it's particularly useful. You really can't hear anything other than that all the way along, but I don't know, inside if you're sat there on the ground you can get regular noises and it's okay, but there you go. Anyway, this first flight I was doing is actually all on 2S. I thought I'll try the 2S outside to see how it feels before I move to the 3S, and you know what, it still felt really good. There is lots of power here, and because this thing is so light, it's not having a problem, it's not struggling. Of course, what you've got in this quad is fairly low range. There's that antenna is sticking in a really awkward position, so you really don't want to take it too far out, and you will notice this reflecting in a very fast dropping RSSI. Now the other thing you will note is as the throttle goes up, we get more jello in the footage. When you're just cruising about, it seems pretty smooth. The more you up the throttle, the more jello you get. Because this quad's so light, I wanted to see how it did with the yaw washout, so I kept taking it up and doing some dives and pulling out last minute. So what I'm doing, I'm going up, I'm coming all the way off the throttle, and then I'm throttling on and pulling out last minute. And there was no yaw washout. Once again, the Mobula has come over as so light that it's able to get away with it. So on the next flight I did, I used the included 300 milliamp FrSky to see how this would do. And I was joined by my brother-in-law Graham here. This is whose field it is, and he was just mowing the field with his tractor. And he was saying, having looked at it, how is that going to fly? Because it was quite windy. And I was saying, look, this thing just cuts through the air. It doesn't seem to have an effect. I mean, obviously it does a little bit, but you'd be surprised. Given this is a ducted fan quad, this coped in some reasonably strong gusts of wind without really batting an eyelid. What I do see though is that jello. That jello is there on high throttle. I think perhaps we can tune it out. It kind of depends if it's down to a little bit of oscillation under really serious throttle, or it's the frame flex is doing it. I'll have to look at that, but we could perhaps tune it out, and we'll have to have a go at that. Now, of course, the 300 milliamp FrSky is heavier than the 300 milliamp 2S, as you would expect. So I was interested to see how it would cope when we did the dive. So we're going up high with the throttle, we're throttling off, we're putting in a dive, and then we're throttling out as we come down towards the ground. And yep, the news is there is no yaw wash, which is pretty amazing on this sort of quad. I'm really happy with that. Now, on this flight, unlike the indoor flight, I've got the camera pointing up all the way, so sort of get maximum speed out of it. Obviously, it's tiny, For the scale of it, it's fast, but if you put it in a great big open field, it feels slow. So you need something, as I always say, something proximity to fly over. I was using this sort of pile of general dirt and cow manure as my proximity thing. But yeah, it coped fine. You can do acro, you can fly it around as you want. You can put it into nice dives and you don't get yaw washout. It just came across as a really nice quad. It's very similar to flying the regular Mobula, but it's got a lovely HD camera in as well. So this is all great stuff so far. Well, I wasn't quite finished and I decided I needed to test this in a few more conditions. And these little quads I really enjoy taking into sort of tighter spaces, around trees and things like that. Now, this is where it's a bit more of a struggle because that not ideal FPV view makes it really quite difficult to see these little ghost branches that come up from nowhere. And the RSSI of this receiver made it quite tricky. Now, I actually had a couple of losses of signal going behind myself here, and I actually had one in my garden, which is quite close, and that's just the signal trying to get through rock and walls and stuff. So it's not great there, but you can do it, but expect to crash a bit. This is what it looks like in HD, and it's a lot clearer. If only the live view was this good, huh? And the other reason I wanted to fly here, and I'm flying 2S to start with at the moment, is just to see what sort of throttle I needed. Because, as I mentioned before, some of the jello I was getting was on full throttle. And I haven't touched the PIDs, but this is kind of a little bit more cruisy, mainly because I can't see where I'm going a lot of the time, and I'm sort of trying not to hit things, as I often manage to. And this thing just kept bouncing off stuff without a problem. We had some great fun flying through the woods, and we had some big crashes too. So here was a typical, oops, I didn't see that coming, the old ghost branch thing, and this was just a loss of signal. Most of the time I could just turtle mode out and get back up in the air. Occasionally I would have a bit more of a problem where I've lost a prop, and I didn't notice on this one, and sort of I tried to take off and nothing happened, and I went back and got it, and I thought, oh, I've lost a prop, and then had to go back and find it. And in this sort of environment, there's not an awful lot of difference flying on FrSky. You've obviously got more speed available to you, but unless you know you've got a real clear run, it's very hard to think, oh yeah, I can go as fast as possible here. I mean, that's what you've got. You've got more speed, you've got more thrust, but there's not an awful lot more because obviously the battery weighs a little bit more. So you'd be surprised how close they actually are together. Because, again, the weight's been kept down really quite nicely on this quad. You can do an awful lot with it, and it really does pay you to try and keep that weight off it. So I had a lot of fun flying both 2S and 3S on this little quad. And it survived some big crashes, it bounced off stuff, and even when the props came off when we were a bit battered, it still flew pretty well. And as I said, because we're not hitting that high throttle moment all the time, I tend to think that we're getting slightly better or less jello-y footage, but it'd be interesting to see if that can be tuned out to make even better. So conclusions then. Well, I've got two little bugbears on it, and they're relatively minor, but they just kind of annoyed me a bit. And they're to do with how the battery goes in and the antenna. Let me show you a quick close-up. This is where the battery has to go into, and the problem with it is it means the battery has to be a specific size, and even this one that came with it, this is the 300 milliamp 3S from Happymodel, is quite a struggle to get in. It is a very tight fit. You kind of need to get some battery lube, you feel sometimes. And the other problem with that is here is the antenna for the receiver. Now originally it was under there, and I've got it poking out just here for a slightly better signal, but it's not great, and you can see how easily it can get blocked. So it's certainly not anything you could do any range with. So yeah, I would like it more if we got rid of these battery holders altogether and had some sort of traditional strap, because then you wouldn't be limited to a very specific size of battery that had to go in there. Now, as far as the receiver goes, I mean, I like it that it's an SPI receiver and you don't have to bind it. And one could argue that on this size of things, you shouldn't really be flying far away because it's tiddly. But it's just when you get flying outside, you're like, wee, I'm going, and you just sort of feel you got a good picture. It's all going well. You feel you should be able to go further. and you can't, which is a bit of a shame, but these are minor problems on what is otherwise a fantastic quad. It's hard to believe where we've come from putting a camera on the original Blade Inductrix up to this tiny little thing which has an HD camera on it, and weighs nothing and flies really fantastic. I mean, they've repeated the original Mobula 7 2S worked really well because they kept that weight down, and they've done the same. Despite putting a Caddx Turtles V2 in there, it still weighs peanuts, and so you can go into full dive, you can pull out, you can do acro stuff, you can fly it quite happily on a 2S or a 3S, and it will just perform. So that is a really nice touch. So as far as the HD recording goes, you saw we had some issues when under high throttle and getting that jello effect in. Is this a characteristic of this sort of quad or this frame, or is it just a tune? I don't know, but I'd like to go and do some more of that, because I can imagine myself flying this quite a bit more, because you can take it anywhere and you can just fly it around, and it's absolutely fantastic. Now you will notice at the start of the video I said this is my second Cine Whoop, in which case you'll think, well, what was the first one? Now what happened is I was filming a video for the first one, and some way into that the camera broke, and that was in fact a Caddx Turtle V2, exactly the same as this one. That's completely died and I have to get a replacement, and I noticed this button didn't work from the get-go, and I'm just slightly worried that they are a little bit fragile and don't like being crashed into the ground a lot. I don't know. I hope this stands up to a bit of punishment, because these sort of things you want to fly without restriction. You just want to be able to throw them around, and because generally speaking they are nice and light, they just sort of bounce off the ground and you sort of flip them over again and you carry on. I mean, this one's absolutely been fine, and the other one only had a very minor crash that seemed to damage it, so maybe it was just fault. But fingers crossed on the Caddx Turtle V2, because what it can produce in this footprint, and I'm ignoring the jello bit under full throttle, is actually really very nice. So yeah, I think this is a fantastic Cine Whoop. It will just fly anywhere and fly very nicely. You can fly inside, you can fly outside. A very worthy follow-up for the original. Now I would say that if you didn't care about HD and you wanted the best possible picture, then I think the regular FPV cameras do a better job in getting you a picture. But if you're willing to take that little hit and make that compromise on your live picture, then having 1080p 60 FPS is well worth it, just for flying around, and especially if you're just cruising, you get some really nice pictures. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I won't, because I'll try and follow up on this and do that little bit of tuning, see what I can do to get that smoother. In the meantime, this is the Mobula 7 HD, and this was supplied very kindly for Banggood for review. Thanks very much, Banggood, and of course you will find links down below where you can get it from the Banggood page. Until next time, I hope that was helpful, and I'll catch you later. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.